Hey friends, I want to do a quick Bible study on time prophecy. Some of us are familiar with the 7-year sabbatical cycle or the 49-year jubilee cycle. And these are patterns that we see come up to present day, and a pattern that you can see drawn back all the way to the scriptures, to the Bible. So what I want to do is kind of build an anchor of time in the Bible. What we're going to do is look at Daniel chapter 9. Because in Daniel chapter 9, it gives the year into the season that Christ started his ministry, his baptism, the cross, the stoning of Stephen, and other events that we'll get to. So it's a very specific book, and it was written nearly 600 years before Christ, so it's really an amazing book. In this video, I intend on kind of building a background, and then in the next video, we'll go directly into Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9 is a continuation of Daniel chapter 8. Okay, and so I kind of want to explain what is happening before this, before we go to Daniel chapter 9. Okay. The book of Daniel is built on the method of repeat and enlarge. Okay. And so while all the chapters are significant, and we'll circle back to them, there are four chapters that really stick out as far as parallelism. Okay, and so I'm going to try to make this very simple, so it's something enjoyable for people that know the Bible and people that don't know the Bible. Daniel chapter 2. Okay, first let's get a picture of where these visions were given in Daniel's life. In the first vision, in Daniel chapter 2, it's a dream that's received by King Nebuchadnezzar in his second year of reign. And Daniel would have been about 20 years old. Then the second vision, in Daniel chapter 7, this is a vision received by Daniel in the first year of Belshazzar. Some say that Belshazzar was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, or somehow related. But anyway, it's 60 years later, and so that's what I'm trying to show, is that the first vision was given to Nebuchadnezzar, when Daniel was 20, around 20. I don't know how to, but it's something that Daniel interpreted the dream for Nebuchadnezzar, and it's something that really put him in favor with the king. But the first vision that Daniel receives directly is in Daniel chapter 7, when he is now 80 years old. And so it's a vision that we'll read this, it's kind of troublesome, and he really has a hard time with it. And a couple years go by, and then in Daniel chapter 8, which is the third year of Belshazzar, so about 2 years later, he's given a little bit more information on the same dream, Daniel chapter 7, which is, covering the same material as Daniel chapter 2. Again, remember, this is repeat and enlarge. And so in Daniel chapter 8, he's given more information in the third year of Belshazzar. In Daniel chapter 9, which we'll read, it says that it's the first year of Darius. This was the same year as the third year of Belshazzar. Babylon was conquered that year. And so in Daniel chapter 9, he's given, he would have been about 82 years old. And he's given the vision in Daniel chapter 8. He's given the vision in Daniel chapter 9. And then he's still, of course, troubled, and we're going to see that he fasts for 3 weeks, just eating nothing, vegetables and water, a very plain diet. And then God reveals to him more information in Daniel chapter 11. All of this being the same year. Okay? So my point is, a vision is given to Nebuchadnezzar when Daniel's 20 years old. Okay? But then later, he directly receives a vision when he's 80, and then he gets these 3 other visions when he's about 82 years old. Okay? And so God is just giving Daniel as much as he can chew, okay, at a time. All right, sorry, a friend came and I lost my place. So Daniel chapter 2. Okay. Daniel chapter 2 is a vision that is given to King Nebuchadnezzar, right? And what it is, it's a statue. And this statue is composed of 4 metals, which represent 4 kingdoms. Okay, and we'll describe this. So it's a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, waist and thighs of brass, the legs are iron, and there's feet that are partly iron, partly clay. Okay, so we have 4 metals. Okay, in chapter 2, verse 38, Daniel says, "You, King Nebuchadnezzar, are this head of gold, and then after thee shall arise another kingdom," etc. So in Daniel chapter 2, we are given the first piece of the puzzle, that Babylon, the kingdom of Babylon, is the head of gold. Now, it's not Nebuchadnezzar as a king, because only 2 kings came after Nebuchadnezzar before the kingdom fell. So these are, again, 4 kingdoms. We'll elaborate further on this, but let's jump to Daniel chapter 7. So remember, Daniel chapter 7, Daniel would be about 80 years old, and he receives a dream, and it's of 4 beasts. Well, in chapter 7, verse 17, it says that the beasts that you saw are kingdoms, or kings or kingdoms. And that's further clarified as you keep reading. But you immediately see that these 4 beasts are a parallel of what we saw in Daniel chapter 2. Okay, these 4 beasts and these 4 metals are 4 kingdoms. Okay, the first beast is a lion with wings, very much a symbol of Mesopotamia, Babylon. You have lions on the Ishtar gate, etc. Often you see lions or animals with wings when you look up Mesopotamia. And there's more detail, but that's not what this video is for. Okay, so the first one is a lion with wings. Then you have a bear, and this one's significant. It's a bear that's lifted on one side. It has 3 ribs in its mouth, and it's told to arise, devour much flesh. Okay. We could probably touch on that more when we go to Daniel chapter 8, because it's expanded upon. Okay. The third beast is a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings. And then the 4th beast is an undescribable, it says terrible beast. Okay, so who are these? Again, we already have the first kingdom, which is Nebuchadnezzar. In Daniel chapter 8, and we'll get there, but we're given the 2nd and 3rd kingdom. It's Medo-Persia is the 2nd kingdom, which we know Medo-Persia conquered Babylon in 538 BC under Cyrus the Great. Okay. And then Medo-Persia, or the Achaemenid Empire, etc., was conquered by Greece, okay? Alexander the Great, okay, in 332, 331 BC. So we have these first 3 kingdoms. Again, we're going to find more information in Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 11. Okay. The 4th kingdom is the only kingdom that is not directly answered. Okay. Medo-Persia is directly answered in Daniel chapter 8, verse 20. It says, "The ram that you saw, the 2 horns of the ram, are the kings of Media and Persia." You can read it. But Daniel chapter 8, verse 20. And then the next verse, Daniel chapter 8, verse 21, says, "The goat that you saw with the horn between its eyes is Grecia, is the king of Grecia, the first king of Grecia." And so, again, answers are given directly in the Bible of these first 3 kings. Now, it's the 4th kingdom that is not given, an answer directly, but there's so much prophecy on this kingdom that you cannot mistake it, okay? Because not only does it give description, but it gives very specific time prophecies and things that we can even see in our current day that have just occurred in the last, couple years. Okay, it's things that occur. Okay. So the 4th kingdom is the Roman Empire. Okay. And the little horn power that we're going to talk about right now is the papacy. Some people, in some Christian circles, they are taught that it's Antiochus Epiphanes. and we'll talk about that. But I guess I want to just, encourage people, all of us, myself included, when I first became a Christian, you're so hungry to just find information. We don't always read the right information, and that's okay. And sometimes we have to come out of what we learned incorrectly. And I guess just be humble enough to recognize that it's not what we thought it was. I've had to do this, and I think everyone has to do this. But the fourth kingdom is the Roman Empire, and the little horn power is the papacy. Okay. So what we're going to do, I think we'll read Daniel chapter 8, because like I said, it's Daniel chapter 8 is what launches us into Daniel chapter 9. And so as I read Daniel chapter 8, I can comment more on parallels that are found in chapters 2, 7, and 11. Okay. All right, now we'll jump into Daniel chapter 8. We'll go verse by verse, and hopefully it'll become more alive as we read it. So remember that Daniel would have been about 82 years old when he received this vision. And the vision that he received prior to this in Daniel chapter 7, he finishes the chapter by saying that he was troubled and did not quite understand the vision. Okay, and so now he's being given more information in chapter 8. When we read Daniel 3 and 4, okay, describing the ram with two horns, like mentioned before, we're given who it is. It's Medo-Persia, and this is said in verse 20. Okay. When you read verses 5 through 8, talking about the Grecian Empire, we are pointed out directly that it is Greece in verse 21. Okay. But in verse 9, in verse 9 we are introduced to a new power, a new kingdom. Okay. And so let's read that. Let me read verse 8 just to get a little bit of context, and then we'll go into 9. It says, "Therefore the he-goat," speaking about Alexander the Great, "waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones before the 4 winds of heaven." Okay. So we know, some of us that know this prophecy already, that, just like in Daniel chapter 7, where the leopard has 4 heads and dominion was given to it, here we have the same thing. Where we have these 4 horns and that go to the 4 winds. And this is speaking about the Grecian Empire. When Alexander died, his kingdom was divided into 4 regions. So I'll put up a little map of that. But in 168, okay, I'm rounding somewhere around there. In 168 BC, Rome conquered Macedonia. Okay. It wasn't really until the Battle of Corinth that Rome became, really took over on the stage, on the world stage. So that's what we see here. So when we read the next verse, verse 9, it says, "Out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great." Okay. This little horn that waxed exceeding great, we can see a parallel here to Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, where it says that the little horn became strong exceedingly. Okay. And then it says right after that, let me go to it, Daniel 7, verse 7. And so I'll just start from the beginning. "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, or a 4th kingdom, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth." Well, iron, now we're seeing a parallel to Daniel chapter 2, and there's more as the verse continues. But as you read down in verse 8, Daniel 7, verse 8, out of this beast came 10 horns. And it says in verse 8, "I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn." Okay, so here we have a little horn that comes out from these 10 horns, which represent kingdoms. which come off of this undescribable beast, which is separate from this leopard with 4 heads. So these are talking about 2 different kingdoms. So again, this cannot be Antiochus. Antiochus was part of the Grecian Empire. He was part of the Seleucid Empire. Okay, and he controlled Syria. He was actually the 8th king out of a line of 26 kings. I mean, so he's not really that significant. And also, just to add to it, he went into Egypt and he was demanded by the Romans to leave Egypt, and he complied, and then he paid tribute to the Romans. So who's greater? The one that says, get out of here, or the one that runs with the tail between their legs? So again, it's not Antiochus, it's the Roman power. Okay, back to Daniel 8. Daniel 8, verse 9. It says, out of one of them, right, out of Macedonia came forth the little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. Okay. Well, Rome did in fact expand in those regions. The south, you could say more specifically being Egypt, conquered Egypt sometime around 65 BC. The east being Syria, which it conquered 63, and then the pleasant land we know as Israel or Judea was conquered in 60 BC. Again, around that time. Okay. So again, we're speaking here of the Roman Empire. Verse 10. It waxed great. Okay. The Roman Empire waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Well, we know that the host is a body of believers, or it's God's people, and stars are often referred in the Bible to God's messengers, right? Either both to angels and to men. Okay, angels would be Revelation chapter 12. Men would be Daniel chapter 12, verse 3. Also, Abraham, his descendants are likened to the stars. And so here you have in verse 10, it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars. Well, the Roman Empire, whether it is pagan Rome or papal Rome, of course did in fact persecute God's people. Verse 11, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. Okay, well, the prince of the host is Christ. Okay, we see here he's referred to as the prince of the host. In chapter 9, he's going to be referred to as Messiah the Prince. In chapter 11, he's referred to as the Prince of the Covenant. And then there's another description, I forget where it is. But, again, verse 11, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. Okay. This is true, again, for both pagan Rome and papal Rome. Christ was crucified under pagan Rome. Okay. And if it's applied to papal Rome, the Pope, his very title is the Vicar of Christ, the representative of Christ on earth. He's exalting himself to the prince of the host. And by him, now still speaking about Rome, the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Okay. Notice that when it says daily, that this is an italicized word, meaning that it's a supplemented word. I had a hard time with this word, daily, just because I've heard in the past that it was one thing. I've heard a few things, and again, I really had to toy around with it. But although it might be a little confusing, because it was for me in the beginning, I do believe that in a broad sense it's paganism. The reason being is because, well, not just this reason, but some just things that point out. We're going to read in verse 13 that the daily and the transgression of desolation, trodden God's people underfoot. And so the daily obviously has to be something that suppresses God's people. And when we get to chapter 11, I'll just point out some things in 11 later, because it's a complicated chapter. It speaks of the daily, and it's in the same context. And so the word daily, if you look at this throughout the Old Testament with in a concordance, the word that's used is a perpetual or continual. So I do think that this was pagan Rome. Okay, and again, we'll see this more as we go along. It says, "Yea, he magnified himself, even to the prince of the host." Well, the Caesars called themselves gods, and the Pope puts himself in the place of God. Okay, it's actually called a Caesaro-papal power, a church-state union that was instituted by Justinian, the emperor. And by him, now this is by Rome, the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary, Rome's sanctuary, was cast down. Okay, well, again, if we're talking about the pagan sanctuary, it was cast down. We know that Rome was a pagan religion until Constantine had claimed Christianity to be the religion of the state and moved the capital in 330 AD to Constantinople. And so, in fact, you could say his sanctuary was cast down. Actually, if you just go into Wikipedia, you'll even read that Constantine attempted, or did, he stopped sacrifices, pagan sacrifice. This is a union of church and state. Okay, and we're going to see that further in verse 12. This is further expounded upon, of course, in chapter 11, where this power is a church-state power. Okay, it receives worship and has control over the people. But also in chapter 2, okay, in chapter 2 we have the iron legs, which are Rome. But then the iron legs, go to the feet, which the feet are partly of iron and partly of clay. This is churchcraft and statecraft. It's an attempt to join church and state. And if you don't believe that, let's just read it and go to chapter 2, and we'll think about, I'll give you something to think about later. So, again, chapter 2, verse 40. "The fourth kingdom, which we know is the Roman Empire, shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise." So this kingdom, okay, divides, just like in Daniel chapter 7. Okay, the 10 horns come off this kingdom. It divides into many kingdoms. Verse 41. "Whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided." Okay, so I think that's significant. "But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay." Okay, notice that it says miry clay, dirty clay. Verse 42, "And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so shall the kingdom be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron does not mix with clay." Okay. So it says here that they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. And I don't want to go too much into this, but you can think of Genesis chapter 6, I think it's verse 2. Again, part of Christianity believes in Nephilim and some really bizarre things. And I don't mean to offend anyone, but it's kind of bizarre. Where it talks about the sons of God marrying the daughters of men. And we know that this is, Adam is called the son of God, and his descendants were sons of God. And so it's when the descendants of Seth, started to marry with the descendants of Cain. This is what the verse is referring to. The Bible is very clear about, to be separate from the world. Can two walk together unless they be agreed? And so here when it says that in Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. This is, again, churchcraft and statecraft. It's an attempt. It's compromised Christianity, essentially. Okay. So just take that and think about it, because we're going to see it more as we read. Going back to Daniel chapter 8, where were we? We were in verse 12. So in verse 11, we see that he magnifies himself even to the prince of the host. And by him the daily, or their form of religion, was taken away, and the place of their sanctuary was cast down, paganism. Verse 12, and a host was given him against the daily. So a body of believers, a host, was given to him, that's Rome, against the daily, against paganism, by reason of transgression. And it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Well, of course it cast down the truth. I mean, it's compromised Christianity, okay? And you cannot, like the Laodicean church, you cannot be lukewarm, which is what happened here. This is an institution that is very dangerous, right? Because it's not just a political institution, it's a geopolitical institution. And so when you have something that's under the garb of religion, of peace, it's that much more dangerous. Okay? It's a very cunningly contrived, false ecclesiastical system of worship. Okay? And so it's just that much more dangerous. And we see that in Daniel chapter 7. Go to Daniel chapter 7, verse 25. And he, speaking of the papacy, shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, right? Both pagan and papal Rome, as we mentioned, persecuted God's people. Papal Rome persecuted God's people in the name of God. And it says here, and the system shall think to change times and laws. Okay. Well, we know that the papal system did both of those things. It changed the law of God. Okay, the Ten Commandments in the Catholic Church are different. They removed the Sabbath, which most of the Christian world doesn't understand today. And it removed the second commandment, to not worship graven images. Of course, it changed more than that, but it has attempted to change God's law. And a lot of people today are still in darkness because of this. And it says that it shall try to change the times. Well, we know that today we are under the Roman calendar, the solar calendar, and not the lunar Jewish calendar. Okay, and this really does an injustice because most of Christianity doesn't understand the feasts and the typology, the symbolism behind it that really bring out the gospel. The 7 feasts are, they point to the sanctuary service. It's a prophetic, actually, timeline. And so a lot of Christianity doesn't understand this. And it's really easy to understand, and once you understand it, you can learn very rapidly of other things. But the Roman system, the papal system, took away the Jewish feasts, okay, and put in their own feasts. They put in Christmas and Easter, and which is now we're worshiping the goddess of Babylonian fertility with eggs and bunny rabbits. And so, again, this has done an injustice to Christ, to his people. But going back to chapter 8 of Daniel. Verse 13. I'm not going to spend too much time here. Well, we'll see. Let me just kind of get a feel for it. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So, again, a lot of people, I understand, that watch this we're not all from the same background. And so a lot of people don't know or understand the sanctuary service, that there's a sanctuary in heaven. Okay, and this is outlined in Hebrews chapter 8 through 10. Notice the placement of this, which is really interesting. We know that the sanctuary that Christ entered, the Holy of Holies, in, not too long ago. I don't want to be too specific because we're going to explain this. But notice the placement that this verse is mentioned. You have these three kingdoms, right? Medo-Persia. The reason why Babylon is not mentioned here is because it was conquered that year when Daniel was given this vision. But we have these three kingdoms, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome, and pagan Rome, and then it goes into the sanctuary. After that, it goes back into describing further about papal Rome. And this is a parallel to what we see in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7, we see the four kingdoms mentioned, right? Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome in verses 1 through 8. But then, and it talks about papal Rome as well, because it speaks of the little horn power. And then in verse 9, it goes into the heavenly sanctuary and the judgment. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. Let me skip to verse 13, chapter 7, verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days. Okay, and they brought him near before him, and there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, etc. Okay. Those that know the sanctuary message, we understand that a little bit better. We understand what this means about the kingdom being given. That's described in, all the chapters of the Bible, so I won't even go into that tangent. But, again, notice the placement. It mentions the four kingdoms down to papal Rome, and then it mentions the sanctuary in heaven, and then it goes back into further description of papal Rome in Daniel chapter 7. Okay. Again, this is a replica of what we see in 8. I'm sorry if there's any loud noises in the background. So, back to what we were reading in Daniel chapter 8. And so it says, unto 2,300 days shall the sanctuary be cleansed. This will be further clarified, of course, when we talk about Daniel chapter 9 and the 70-week prophecy. We know that here, again, it'll be further clarified, but here the 2,300-day prophecy is a 2,300-year prophecy. The day-to-year principle is being used. This is outlined in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 6, where Ezekiel has to lay on his side for 40 days, representing 40 years. I've given you a day for a year. This is also in Numbers chapter 14, verse 34, where God says the same thing. As the spies were in Canaan for 40 days and were cowards, the people did not go into the land to possess it. They went through the desert for 40 years. And so, again, and he says, I've appointed you a day for a year. Another verse is in Genesis chapter 29, where Jacob is working for Laban, for Rachel and Leah, and he says, fulfill her week. Well, and then of course it clarifies right after that, 7 years. But a week, when a week is referred to, it means 7 years, which is what we'll see in Daniel chapter 9 as well, and other places. Okay. Think about the 7-year sabbatical cycle. Okay, it's a week. It's just one of a few sabbatical institutions in the Bible. So, where was I? So it says in verse 13, it says, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily and transgression of desolation, to trod underfoot the sanctuary and the host? Well, God's people have been trodden underfoot by the pagan Rome power and papal Rome power, up until recently, really. We just don't really realize that it wasn't that long ago that these things occurred. And the same goes for the sanctuary. The sanctuary has been trodden upon, the sanctuary message has been trodden upon. But when it says here, of course, daily and the transgression of desolation, it's speaking of the Roman powers under pagan and papal Rome. So let's continue reading. And it came to pass, when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then, behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Jubilee, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, Son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. This is repeated, by the way, in Daniel chapter 11. We're going to see this time of the end. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep, on my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. Okay, I just had to read that. So what we're seeing is that Daniel did not fully understand this, and so that Christ set Gabriel to give Daniel more understanding. And notice what Gabriel says. Verse 20, Gabriel just spends one verse to describe the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay. And reason being is because Daniel already understands this. Then in verse 21, we're given the Grecian Empire. Again, Daniel understands this. Not that much description is given. But verses 23 down through 27, again, more information is given on this fourth kingdom, on this fourth beast. Which, again, we saw in chapter 7 that the information was expounded upon, and we saw that this was also further expounded upon in chapter 2, which we'll also see is very much expounded on in chapter 11. It's speaking about the same thing, and we're going to continue to see patterns in the language. Okay. Verse 23. I'm going to press pause, a plane's going overhead, and then I'll continue. All right, so now we're going to jump into the description that's given further in verses 23 through 27. And I have my wife here as an audience, which is good. It says, In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. So when you see a rare word, you go to a concordance and you look at where is this repeated. And this is repeated in Deuteronomy 28. Go to it, Deuteronomy 28, verses 49. Fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences. Again, Deuteronomy 28, let's start in verse 49. And this is written by Moses. Okay, so it says here, The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth. Okay, let me just make a comment there. An eagle. In Daniel chapter 7, we were given 4 beasts, none of which were an eagle. And I think it's interesting. We're going to see that in the Bible, Rome is, in the gospel, in other places, that Rome is likened to an eagle. I think that even the United States, it's like anything that Rome touches has a symbol of an eagle. Like my family's from Spain. Fascist Spain, which was very much in line with the Catholic Church, has the eagle on the flag. The Nazi Party, fascist, which the Catholic Church is a fascist institution. They even say it themselves. They have the eagle on their flag. The United States, in Revelation chapter 13, that there's an image made to the beast by the beast of the sea and the beast of the... Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but for those that already know Revelation, it's the image is... There's another image to the beast. It just repeats itself over and over again. And so it's just interesting that, and I'll find a picture and I'll look it up online. I know that the Roman military always had an eagle on their, on their helmets, on their shields. And so my wife says she has those pictures. Imagine when you're being attacked by an army that has eagles swift as the eagle flies. And so, of course, it just makes sense to me. But I'll continue reading. A nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Other translations say, a nation whose tongue you will not have heard. Okay, this cannot be Babylon. Okay, the Babylonians, they spoke a similar dialect to that of Palestine. Daniel and the courts, they spoke Aramaic as they spoke in Judea. And so it cannot be Babylon. It's Latin, it's Rome, which again is a language that wouldn't have been very unfamiliar and unrelated to Aramaic or any language spoken in Palestine. And then in verse 50 it says, a nation of fierce countenance. Well, we just saw that in Daniel chapter 8, verse 23. Which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. This might be a little too much to say, but that reminds me of the Jesuit oath. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of thy land, until thou be destroyed. I'm just going to skip to verse 52 and 53. And he shall, Rome, shall besiege thee in all thy gates, until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest, throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. Jerusalem was besieged by Rome 40 years after the cross, a generation after the cross. Just like Christ said, he said all of this will happen to this generation. And here 40 years later, Jerusalem is taken. And the Jews, if you read history, they trusted in their walls, and they didn't believe that the Romans were going to be able to take them out. Verse 53, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord thy God hath given thee in the siege. This is only recorded for when the Jews were besieged or sieged by the Romans, not the Babylonians. This is written about in detail by Josephus and other historians, that they even ate their own children. Okay. And you can continue reading down to verse 57 and just see that it's speaking about the Roman power. All right, sorry, I had to let the noise die down a little bit. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 8, verse 23. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance, which we saw in Deuteronomy, in understanding dark sentences, which is somewhat what we saw in Deuteronomy, right? A language that we had not heard, shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. This is very true. The Roman Empire is very well known for, one of the reasons for its strength was because of how it revolutionized fighting and hiring men for the army. And if we're speaking of papal Rome controlled all the kings of Europe. It controlled the armies of Europe. So again, not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Again, no need for comment. Dark ages, the persecution, the Inquisition, etc. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. The current Pope, Francis, is referred to as a man of peace. This is not a religious institution, it's a geopolitical religious institution. And much of Pope Francis, if you know his history in the dirty wars of Argentina, and further things that we can go into, this is image projection, and he's supposed to give an image of piety and peace, when in fact it's a political institution. in May of next year, he's meeting with all the political leaders of the world. So to say that this is just a religious institution, the leaders of the world don't go to Nepal, to talk with the Dalai Lama. The leaders of the world, all of the United States mayors and governors, they all went to the Vatican for a climate change summit. The leaders of the world go to the Vatican for different meetings, etc. CEOs of every company, everything, go to the Vatican. By peace he shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. So again, this being a reference to Daniel chapter 2. Verse 26, and the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. So we're going to stop very shortly. But it says, none understood it. Okay. We see this same thing happening in Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel chapter 7, the kingdoms are outlined, then the sanctuary, then further information is given on the Roman power. And then Daniel says, I was troubled in my head or my heart, and that he didn't fully understand the message. And here we have the same thing in Daniel chapter 8, an image of the kingdoms, the sanctuary message, and then it goes back to the Roman power, and then he says, none understood it. But what did he not understand? Okay. He understood Medo-Persia, because Gabriel only spends one verse saying this is Medo-Persia. Daniel's okay, I get it. He understands Greece, again, because only one verse is mentioned. But then further information is expounded upon on the papal power. But what is not expounded upon? The sanctuary, right? What he saw, the vision that he saw in chapter 7, well, in chapter 7, no time prophecy was given, but he sees the Son of Man come before the Ancient of Days. And now he's given another little piece of the puzzle. Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And so this has to be of the most importance. What's more important to Daniel? The little horn power or the sanctuary in heaven? The Son of God presenting himself before the Ancient of Days. And so this is what Daniel is trying to determine. And this is what we see when we read these next verses. We'll read this and then we'll stop. Chapter 9, verse 1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus. This is not the Ahasuerus of Esther. Okay? The Ahasuerus in Esther, whose name is also Xerxes. In Esther it was the second or third year of his reign, and this is 40 or 50 years before that. Okay, so just go into Wikipedia, you can understand better on the list of the kings. It says here, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus. Oh, by the way, do you know who Darius was? He was the uncle of Cyrus. That's why Darius was given reign over the Babylonian realm, was because Cyrus, his nephew, gave him that power. Okay. Sorry for stopping so many times. And that's why Cyrus is the next ruler, because Darius dies in 2 or 3 years. He was an old man. Yeah. Okay. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And I set my face unto the Lord God, to seek by prayer and supplications with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. So why Why is he presenting himself before God in prayer, in supplication, sackcloth and ashes? He's confused about this time prophecy. Okay, unto 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. And so, again, as I mentioned, they don't have Google. They don't have cell phones. He's not calling his friends. Daniel is going to the scriptures, and he's trying to think, okay, what is being said here? There's a time prophecy. Yeah, and exactly. So, just like when we see a time prophecy, we go back to the Bible, and Daniel goes back to Jeremiah, okay? And this confuses him because it says the sanctuary will be cleansed. But Daniel knows very well that the sanctuary was destroyed like 50 years before this, okay, in Jerusalem. And so, again, he's troubled by this. And so here he comes to pray, and this is one of the most well-known prayers in the Bible. But we're going to skip a lot of the prayer and just make a point, and we'll stop this video. Go to Daniel chapter 9, verse 21. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, okay, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me, and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplication, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. Okay. So God has sent Gabriel, or Christ has sent Gabriel, to give him understanding of this vision. Okay. He doesn't say that it's the book of Daniel. He gives him now the other piece of the equation. Okay. He says, we'll just read this and I'll stop the video for next time. Verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. Okay. The word determined is cut off. Okay. Cut off from what? Okay. The only time prophecy was the 2,300 days. So this 70-week prophecy is going to be cut off from, or removed from, the 2,300-day prophecy. And in verse 25, we are given a starting date to when this time prophecy starts. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. We'll continue reading the next verses in the next video. Thanks guys for watching. Hope this was somewhat understandable. Sorry for the dogs, and it was a relatively quiet day today. I've had a lot more noise than this. So, I'm happy, I'm grateful. Okay.